Greg already suffered the brunt of my rant, but I am being the most unsuccessful in my 7 years of imparting absolutely essential lessons with you guys, and so I am seeking to enlist your assistance to tell me how better can I convey these important things. We have lost, damaged, or just cannot find more equipment than ever before in the history of freedom. Also, it appears that even though we have a game plan, if I'm off the boat, our game plan frequently doesn't come to completion. Maybe we set too ambitious of a game plan, or maybe we just didn't have good drive and initiative to complete the game plan. So I'm thinking, let's start rotating an official first mate's position. Each week we will have a different first mate who, if I'm not here, is responsible to make sure everything gets done and gets done properly, and that our accountability level increases as far as being able to find things, not lose things, or damage things. Because one of the primary lessons, and I heard it not echoed verbatim from Captain Phillip, is you've got to have your resources. He talks about provisioning with enough food to last several months at sea. Well, that's great, but if you don't, that keeps you going, but if you don't have the equipment and the tools to keep the boat going at sea, now you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So we have to be able to find our stuff, and we have to not lose our stuff, because as Captain Ron says, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen out there. And if we are not constantly asking ourselves, what if, and if we are not constantly trying to be sure that everything is a $5 job, and if we are not constantly being aware so that we can quickly identify any problems before they become major, then we're going to find ourselves in trouble. And this may be when I'm not there to help out with the trouble. These are the things that I hope you learn aboard Freedom, so that no matter what you do, whether you go on to work on land or you go on to be a pirate, that the lessons you learn here save your life or save your boat, or at least make your time on a boat much more enjoyable, because as I always taught my kids, the guy with the umbrella is dancing in the rain. So if you are prepared, you can take advantage of the opportunities that may seem like absolute catastrophe to people who are unprepared. So this week, Clive, you've been here the longest. If you would please be first mate this week and ensure that whatever our game plan is, that progresses well, and even though we are all responsible for inspecting our own work, that's another lesson I'm trying to teach you. Never walk away till you've done a final inspection, and you make sure it's right, because if you're single-handing, there's nobody inspecting behind you. You don't do it right, might fall apart on you. Then the first mate also kind of goes around behind to see if a second pair of eyes catches something undone or not done as a $5 job, to assist us in our evolution towards perfection to do that. So our objective Saturday of getting the Port Alma ship shape and ready for a new crew member sounds like it has not been achieved.
It took charge of that task.
That-
I'm
yes.
not pointing fingers either, but where is most of this damage coming from as well?
Well, I understand that, but we are a crew.
Yeah.
And so if you observe someone doing something against what I am trying to instill, then
I
it
don't
is
think it's-
incumbent upon
I
each
don't
of
think
us
it's
to point it
against-
out.
I don't think it's against you.
Well,
But
it's
it should
not
be negligent.
adhering.
It's negligence.
Yes. And as far as culpability goes, but it all boils down to the same thing. Your boat goes to the bottom, and you're dog paddling in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So let us help each other achieve our best self.
But when you've said something and then the crew says something, and if it's not happening, I mean, yeah, then there's something wrong.
Yes. And we need to address those. Remember, part of being impeccable with your speech and not taking things personally is if you screw up 3 times, expect that to be brought to your attention 3 times. So don't screw up 3 times. And it's not anybody picking on you, it's you just keep screwing up. So there's a huge difference. So we cannot continue
Screwing up. Yes.
along
Yes.
the same course. We must learn these lessons. It is absolutely imperative, not just to the success of freedom. We have a charter coming up in 2 weeks, but to your success. So we have some major things that are taking us longer than we would have hoped, but we are steadily progressing. One of my disappointments on Sunday is when I personally checked out the generators Sunday. I discovered we had an oil leak that had not been brought to my attention from the small generator.
Where was the leak from the rear main seal?
It appears to be. I put a new diaper down there to see how grievous it was, and the new diaper has quite a bit of oil on it. Now the dipstick is still going down steadily, but not catastrophically. That's why we're still using it. 1, we don't have a choice, but 2, it wasn't bad enough to drop everything and start working on it on Sunday. But it does mean we now have to put that on our list of things to do in the near future, is to replace that rear main seal. That's what it appears to be. Until we get the big generator working so we can switch back over to it, and we pressure wash and get all new clean diapers on the little generator and then run it for 30 minutes and see what's going on. We can't know for sure, but it's looking suspiciously like the rear main seal, which is a 3-day job.
So we're hopefully about to wrap up on the big generator.
We hope.
Yes, and so then somebody can start working on the small generator.
Yes.
once we're done with that.
I'd like-
Well, we may not be able to afford to do that before this charter, because although it's only a 3-day project, first we have to find my hydraulic jacks in the container in order to do that project, and secondly we have many other things to do. So as long as it's a small leak, I may put some leak stop in there and we'll only be relying on it. If we get the big generator working again good, we'll put 90% of the hours on the big generator, use the little generator only when we have to, and continue on until after the charters, and then address when we don't have a charter staring down our throat. Now, if we are able to find the jacks today, and if these other projects, remember I'm still very worried about getting somebody out here for this, I have to call this morning, then we may be able to push it up, because it is something we could do in 3 days. So we might push it up and do it before the charter. But I got to get the parts here, which doesn't happen overnight. So this was brand new to me on Sunday. So the first thing I have to say is ask yourselves, why did I have to discover it myself when we've had people inspecting every morning when they check the oil? Then you're not being fully aware, you're not inspecting like your life depends on it. You must get in that habit that these systems are your support system. You can't just say, well, the generator went out, I guess, as soon as the batteries run out of charge, then we'll lose several $100s worth of food, which can't even, the batteries don't even matter with that. If the generator doesn't run, our freezer, in 3 days, we have rotten meat down there. Hundreds of dollars of food. So now what are we eating?
Captain,
And we have a huge mess to clean up with rotten food everywhere. Yes.
should I add pulling those diapers out, visually inspecting
You
them
don't have
every
to
time I
pull
do the
them out.
unit?
All you got to do is take your headlamp that you always go down in the engine room. I discovered the leak with just my headlamp with my class 2 cataract 64-year-old eyes, and I easily saw an oil leak down there. So it wasn't lurking in a dark corner. It was very obvious if you were looking. So we have to, the morning checkout, just like on the fire department, is to make sure everything's okay for a day full of who knows what.
Lives depend on it.
Any emergency. And it sounds, in the fire department, it seems very natural to say lives depend on it, because it's very obvious we're reminded every day of it. Here, it sounds melodramatic, but it's not really. When we go out to sea, if we have just spent the last 3 months neglecting our equipment, we're going to find out about it at sea, and then it's too late, then our lives do depend on it. If we have been meticulously caring for our equipment for the 3 months going to sea, it's going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be a honeymoon cruise that we will all enjoy to the absolute maximum. When we sailed to Florida with my crew at that time, it was like it could not have been better. And I will tell you, the boom fell off during that. Not because anybody failed to inspect or anything else, 34-year-old equipment, it finally failed. We had the equipment, we had the tools, we had the materials on board to put together a repair that we're still using. We banged the rudder on the bottom, getting beaten to death coming into an inlet. We had the materials on board to do an emergency repair, and later an even better repair that we sailed all the way back down here with those repairs and chartered for a season. So that's how good our repairs were, just with what we had on board. But throughout all of that, our engines performed flawlessly, our water maker was great. Our water maker was damaged before we left because somebody didn't understand all the way means all the way. But my point is that all of our systems, none of them failed en route, so we weren't having any emergencies on the way to Florida. That's because we exercise $5 job mentality in the most mundane, routine things. And that's what's critical. So, this is certainly not the first time I've shared this with you. We must embrace that and not forget it and use our personal mental discipline to make ourselves. You heard Captain Phillip say today he would be tired, wet, and hungry pulling into an anchorage, yet he knew he had to do what he had to do or he would pay the price. That is what mental discipline is exactly. Making yourself do what you know the prudent thing to do is, the safe thing, the smart thing, even when you don't feel like it. When you're tired, when you're hungry, when you're cold, when you're miserable. So, even when it's just checking the oil, we must inspect as though our life depended on it, the whole engine, so whatever is wrong with it, we see the early signs and we can at least document it, watch the progression to the next day to see how bad it is, take corrective action. If it's a loose wire, hey, that's a nice easy fix. Could have been terrible, could have caused a shorted out alternator that is expensive, got to wait a week and a half, 2 weeks for it to arrive, install it, all of that avoided by tightening a loose wire. Wow, stitch in time saves 9. So please, no matter what you're doing, be fully involved in it. Give it your fullest attention. Challenge yourself to find what's wrong. You'll almost always be able to find something. Even if it's real minor, they can just say, okay, I noticed 1 drop of oil out of the raw water pump on the 16 kW. Okay, we'll keep an eye on it. I'll see, do we have a spare? Do we have a rebuild kit? Do I need to order things? That 1 drop of oil is probably not going to progress to something earth-shattering for at least a month or 2. That gives me time to get all the parts assembled and everything else, so that before it becomes 5 drops a day, we can swap it out or rebuild it. That is the mentality. If you learn nothing else on freedom, if you forget all your knots, if you forget everything else, always think what if, always think my life depends on this. I don't know what else to tell you. Do I seem like I'm over dramatic about this point? Do you not understand how critical it is when you're at sea? Okay, please embrace it as like a fundamental principle that must become an inherent part of your thinking every day. Just like when you get up in the morning, your first thought, as soon as the cobwebs are gone, should be, what state is the batteries in? Do I need to rush to get the generator going before I destroy these batteries, or do I have enough time and enough energy to make some coffee? Critical things, it only takes a second or a minute for something very minuscule to deteriorate into something very not fun at all. So please, let's put a bandage on the hemorrhaging that's going on. Let's please be mindful. Let's not lose things. Let's find things. Let's not destroy things, break things. And let's be very careful and be totally immersed so that what we do when our first mate checks behind us, he's not going to find anything wrong. He's going to say that's a $5 job. Okay?
Can you tell us what the philosophy behind the $5 job is?
Yes, I'm glad to.
Yeah. That's a funny story.
There was, and this is many years ago, it first appeared in Reader's Digest back in, I think it was the early 50s. And it's been reprinted many, many times. But there was small town, very small town, old spinstress, rich lady, lived by herself, very, very cantankerous, as old spinstress rich ladies can be. she's walking in town. Here's a bunch of young kids. In the old vernacular, she would refer to them as hooligans. Young kids, just out doing young kids stuff. Probably 10 or 11 years old. And she calls one of them aside and says, how would he like to make some money doing her yard work? And of course, nobody has any money. He thinks, all right, okay. He goes off with her. She describes her pay system. She says, well, if you do a terrible job like I think you're going to do, you're going to get $1. If you do a better job, but still not a good job, you're going to get $2. And she goes up the chain. She goes, $3, that's a good job. That's a good, solid job. I don't think you're capable of that. You're a young hooligan who doesn't know anything. Get a $3 job. She then goes on to say that a $4 job is almost the sky's the limit. It's almost perfect in every way. And a $5 job, don't even think about it. It would be unattainable for someone like you. Don't even concern yourself. That's just superlative in every way. So he does the yard, and she gives him, I think, $1.50, because it was just barely over a terrible job. But it starts him thinking, and the next week, he's going over there every week. The next week, he goes, I could do better than that. I'm going to see if I can get a $2 job. So he doesn't set his sights very high, but he gets the $2 job, and he does it. He seems to be content at that. Every time he has the greatest of intentions in the morning, I'm going to get a $3 job. But after a while, he gets tired, and he settles for a $2 job. That's good enough. $2, that's good. It's more than my friends have. And he settles for the $2 job. But as the summer goes on, he starts getting accustomed to the work, and he starts, I guess, every day every time he does it, she walks around with him and critiques it, points out what's wrong and everything. Yeah, and I should have done better, etc. But it was mostly, lip service. He knew he didn't do a good job. So eventually, though, he starts thinking, I could do better. I will do better. And he gets up to the $3 mark. Now he's a good, solid $3 mark performer for several weeks. And he goes, I could do even better. And again, with the great intentions, but by late afternoon, his energy's fading, and he just goes, well, $3, that's a good job. Good is good enough. And he never makes that $4 mark. Then he discovers, if I take a 15-minute nap under that big tree in the early afternoon, I get like a second wind, and I can go like gangbusters in the afternoon. He said, so let me see if I can get that $4 job. He almost gets it one day, but just falls short, and he comes up. It's almost like when the finish line's in sight, and a guy just doesn't have the final kick and gets left in the dust. So he ends up with the $3 job again. But he vows the next time, I know how to get this. I'm going to do it. And sure enough, he plots out a whole thing. He says, I know this is going to take me the whole day, but if I get my little 15-minute power nap, I can do it, and I'm going to work till sundown, and this is going to be the best job she's ever seen. And he did that. He rolled. He had noticed, you couldn't see it, but pushing, remember, these are push mowers. The push mower, doing that, he could feel in his bare feet ant hills under the grass. And from so much mowing, he could tell this grass is thatched. There was too much buildup of grass matting down, preventing really luxuriant growth under it. So he got a roller and he rolled out every anthill on the property. Then he got a thatcher and he rolled and picked up all the thatch and raked up all the thatch. Then he mowed the yard and raked it again. Then he edged everything, not freehand. He went ahead and used a straight edge chunk of metal and edged everything with a straight edge. He swept it all up, and by nightfall, exhausted, he went to the woman and she said, well, what kind of a job did you do now, today? And she was expecting him to say a $4 job. He said, I did a $5 job. She said, oh, a $5 job? That's pretty big talk for a $3 kid. He said, well, let me show you. And he was very proud, and he showed her everything that had been done. She said, you're absolutely right. This is a $5 job. I guess you are not a $3 kid. I believe we are all $5 kids. I believe we are all capable of doing $5 jobs. I believe we either taught ourselves or others taught us to settle that good enough was only good enough. And on dry land in a brick house, good enough will frequently get you by. Very few brick houses sink, unless you live in Florida, sink on the street. Very few brick houses crash into a reef. Very few brick houses founder in a storm. So you can afford, good enough will get you by on land, but it will not get you by unless you're coupled with being extremely lucky. And luck can be a very fickle thing. Never count on luck. So good enough is not good enough on water. We must be we must be our $5 self out here if we are going to be successful. If we're going to live to tell tales like Captain Phillip, we have to be our $5 self. We don't need a plan, but we need to be prepared for any eventuality. We must be confident in our equipment, in our systems, and in ourselves. And that only comes through precision, through practice, through muscle memory. So that is the $5 job. And that is the standard. That is, you know, the other thing, if you're an auto mechanic, and I've had several auto mechanic interns, and that's both a blessing and a curse, because in a garage, people just want their car to run. Yes, there are people